Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, or whenever you're going to watch this video. I'm going to try to talk about this quick because I could not go to sleep until I put this video out. It was just been heavily on my mind. And this is how my brain operates. I won't go to sleep until I feel that I've accomplished something. So, with that being said, what I want to talk about is I hope this video can bring some clarity to maybe people that come from the analog world. If you are a tape or hard disk recorder user and you were used to working on a console, a tape machine, and using Outboard Gear, or you started in the DAW world where you bought whatever software, Reaper, FL Studio, you just name it, Ableton Live, Cakewalk, Pro Tools, whatever DAW that you bought. And you might even gotten plugins. So sometimes when you say DAWs and plugins, we disassociate ourselves with an actual commercial studio, or just a recording studio with the console, the tape machine, and lots of racks of processing equipment. We call it outboard gear. But in actuality, they're both actually one and the same. The only difference between a DAW, like Pro Tools or whatever, and a recording studio with a tape machine, console, and outboard gear is one is virtual. So there are so it's kind of like this. For those that are new to the tape world, let's say, for those that always worked in DAWs or whatever, what maybe people may never probably thought about this in aspect is everything about digital audio workstations. Everything about digital audio workstations are based off an actual recording studio. So technically, I think they ought to change the name from digital audio workstations to virtual recording studios. Okay. I know some people like, huh? Some people were going to be like, huh? What? Why? Okay. I want you to think about this. Think about this for a second. Track recording, multi-track recording, when it became a thing, the purpose of the multi-track recording, the reason why the two most important things in a control room in a recording studio environment was an actual console, because you had to monitor through the console to record it to a tape machine to multi-track record. And then once you've gotten everything recorded, the outputs from that recording machine would go back in the console to monitor what you did, and now you're ready to do everything that you need to do. Now, when it comes to digital audio workstations, of course, in a recording studio, there's two main rooms: the live room and the control room, where the console and the tape machine is at. So really, it's kind of like, well, how do I relate the two, especially if I never had an opportunity to go into a commercial studio? Okay, let's talk about the commercial studio for just a second, or a recording studio, in a building or whatever. They're going to have a control room and a live room. We're not even talking about the extra facilities like a kitchen, a lounge, a reception area, anything like that. If you're working in your living room is your lounge area. Your kitchen, where you cook your food, is your kitchen. So those are generally the same, right? Or if you got a deck, whatever, you can go on your back deck or whatever. That's your time to get away from. Most people that are building these home recording studios are doing it in the bedroom. So their bedroom is their live room / control room. It's all in one. So that's pretty much it. Other than the differences is commercial recording studios are specifically built and designed for recording. Home recording studios, you have to do everything you can. You have to do everything you can to emulate the commercial studio, to get everything, like a commercial studio. You have to do everything, which is a different video on that. So with that being said, so why am I saying, I'm not trying to insult anyone's intelligence, but it's kind of like this. DAWs, it doesn't matter what it is. Pro Tools, Studio One, Cakewalk, Reaper, Harrison Mix Bus, Ableton Live, they're all designed similarly in a way to get you started, right? But I had to put some thought process into this. Just bear with me on this. Bear with me. I'm not going to be too much longer. If you've noticed, you may or may not notice in the DAWs, the difference between working in the actual commercial studio and then your DAW is your DAW, you have to build everything. You literally have to build everything, is what I'm saying. You have to build your recording studio environment. In a commercial studio, it's already there. They both have pros and cons. One of the most important aspects of the recording, this is why they always called it the centerpiece in a recording studio, was the console. You may not, a lot of times people may not think the console is important because they're working in their DAWs, but the console and knowing mixing consoles and how the channels work, the inserts, the auxiliary sends, the buses, the channels, and the master output section and everything else works. If you know this, you will become a lot better at understanding how your DAW is actually designed. It's actually designed like a virtual recording studio. This is not taught to anyone that buys recording studio software, meaning your DAW. When people buy Pro Tools, Studio One, a lot of people are not taught this. And even the ones that have been working in the analog world, where you were used to working on the console with a tape machine and the outboard gear in the control room and working live room, and you're used to having the patch panel with the live, with the mic cables and the tie lines and everything else, may not have thought about this in perspective. But really, technically, almost every DAW starts you off at your tape machine. They really do. A lot of times you're looking at a blank tape machine. The difference in the real world is that when you have a tape machine, like a 24-track tape machine or 16-track tape machine, or you have a couple of whatever the case, the tracks are already there. You already have your tracks in place. You just gotta send signal to it. You gotta arm the tracks and send signal to it. So you just got to prep the tape machine by putting the tape in there and everything else. A lot of times you have to maintenance the tape. You may even have to calibrate or whatever. But a lot of times your track count is fixed. In DAW world, you just add as many tracks that you feel necessary to record to. So they'll start you off with a blank template. This is the reason why some DAWs give you templates as a default. When you open the software, they give you blank templates for the type of recording session you're going to do. Some may be a blank one. Some may, well, what do you plan on recording? Are you going to do tracking a 16-track band? Or are you going to do, what are you going to track? So they give you some basic templates. Some DAWs do not. And then if you go with one of those templates, they'll set up your tape machine for you, meaning how many tracks. Sometimes you can start off with 24 basic blank tracks. And if you notice this also, when you do that, if you build one with a blank, start off with a blank template, or use an existing template, if you go to your mixing window, now it adds the same amount of channels in the mixer according to your track count. This is not the case in the real studio world. The real studio world is whatever console you buy, how many channels on it, that's how many channels you're working with. Whether you have a 24 track, like this is a 48 channel console. If I got a 24 track tape machine, I'm only going to use half of the board. So I can use the other channels for other things. It also technically has four matrices because it's considered a live board, even though I use it as a recording console. But it also has 8 buses. So that's technically, 48, 56, maybe 60 channels. And of course, whatever other things I can route, because it actually has 10 auxiliaries as well. So those are even more, because I actually have 8 auxiliary sends, or 4 auxiliary sends, but I also have I have up to 10 auxiliaries, so those are even more channels. But in on your console, a console, whether it's a large, if these are consoles, even if you never got a chance to work on these type of consoles, these very big recording studio consoles, these consoles come with auxiliaries. You can set the console up for bus channels, and they have inserts on them as well to insert pieces of gear, and it's a routing to route. In your DAW, you just have to create it. So to become better at your DAW, the best thing I can tell anyone is to learn how actual real analog consoles work. Even if you have a digital console, everything is designed after analog consoles, even digital consoles. If you want to work a digital console a lot better, you need to understand an analog console. Everything generated from analog consoles. Just like if you want to understand what's going on with when you're recording and creating tracks to record, you have to understand how a tape machine actually works. Then all the outboard gear is basically plugins that we call today. So to wrap the video up, the difference between when you want to use your outboard gear in real world, you just have to literally take patch cables, and plug it in with a cable. In the studio world, all you have to do is go to your library of outboard gear, meaning plugins, and just select it. Some allow you to select it, and it'll go on to wherever you send it. Other places will let you drag and drop, or let you drag it to where you want to put it. So it just depends on how the DAW is designed. So a lot of y'all that may be watching this video 15 minutes like, well, why, what is the purpose of that, of you making this video? The point is, this is to help people understand the environment when you're working in a DAW to start thinking that you're actually working in a virtual reality recording studio. You have to think like that if you want your tracks to start to sound like every professional record you've ever heard that when artists go to recording studios, where we're talking to ones that have the analog large format consoles, tape machines, and a lot of outboard gear and racks, and you listen to those amazing recordings from, we're talking, from Michael Jackson to Janet Jackson to Madonna to U2 to Rolling Stones to you name it, the way recording records were always made. The DAW, believe it or not, is designed to work that way. You just have to build. You have to build your recording studio, meaning, one of the most important elements in the entire recording studio, that puts everything together is the recording console. Believe it or not, because everything is working through the recording console. Well, it's doing the exact same thing in your DAW, except instead of you having a real console, you just have a virtual, you have a computer emulated version of a console. This is why when you go to mixing window, this is why they all look like mixing consoles. So basically, the difference in your DAW is when you get your tracks, you can have 5 tracks, 10 tracks, 20 tracks, 25 tracks, 30 tracks, or whatever. Think of those as tracks on a tape machine. Except you just have the ability to edit it. You have way more editing capabilities. You can slide those tracks around. You can duplicate them. You can cut them, paste them, all kinds of stuff that would be a lot more tedious with an actual real tape machine. That's what makes DAW so much easier to work in when it comes to that. And you get so many options to how you want to edit your tracks. You don't have a lot of options in tape world. Now, once you've done all your recording and your editing, it's time to mix it. This is why the mixing console is why we call it a mixing console, other than always just calling it a recording console. It becomes a mixing console. This is why you are so important to set your mixing console and learn how to set up your mixing console like an actual analog console. If you understand how analog consoles work, if you understand how to use the inserts on consoles, how to use the sends and returns on consoles, how to use the auxiliary channels on consoles, how to use bus channels on consoles, and how gear is patched in through an analog console, how they've programmed your DAW will react. This is the reason why you can turn certain functions on and off in your audio interface to get sound to work and get sound not to work. If you set up your routing and everything else, you have to set all that stuff up for for your audio interface to start sending signal out of the interface. Like, for example, most of the time when we start opening up our DAWs and we see our blank, and we have to start adding tracks, we're actually adding tracks as if we're working on a tape machine. Real tape machines, the tracks are already there. You just have to put signal through it. In studio world, you have to add those tracks manually. So you have to literally, I have to keep adding tracks. That's really the difference. And then some DAWs, once you've done all your tracking and recording, it's time to mix it. That's why it's important to work in your mixing window. Your console's window. And then understand how the channels flow. If you understand how the signal flows in a real analog console, you will understand how the signal flows in your DAW's mixer. They are programmed the same way. Every DAW has a different looking mixer. It's almost the same as if you're looking at an SSL console or looking at an API console or a Neve console or an MCI console. It's the same thing. The only difference is in a lot of digital audio workstations mix consoles, you have to add in all the other stuff. Like on a real console, the preamp is already there. Some DAWs you have to add the preamp in there. Most of them already have the preamp in there. That's the main gain and control of that channel. Everything else you have to add. Like a lot of times they won't add auxiliaries because you have to add those auxiliaries manually, right? A lot of times they won't have EQs because you have to literally go in there. Some DAWs give you EQs. And then there are some programs like Cubase, Cakewalk, Luna, that gives you everything, all those parts of the console on those channels, like as if a real console would have. They would have your one console, like in Reason Studio, they've added the SSL channel strip type console as the same way. It's pretty much laid out the same way a real SSL console would be laid out. The same thing with Harrison Mix Bus 32C. It's laid out the same way as if you're working on an actual Harrison mixing console. If you understand how mixing engineers do things on a real console, when you implement those same mixing console when you implement that same mixing console knowledge and apply the same principles that these mixing engineers do on a real console, your audio interface and your mixes will react the exact same way. The sound processing will start to react like an actual real console, and then your mixes will start to sound like you're working in a recording studio and not working in a home amateur studio, is what I'm saying. Even though there's nothing wrong with working with the home recording studio, the difference is what we're trying to do in home recording studios is make the audience think it wasn't recorded at home. It was recorded in a professional recording studio. You're trying to fool the audience. This is what DAWs are designed to do, to fool the audience. And if you're good at it, it will fool your audience. And it will sound professional if you know what you're doing. So it's kind of like, well, what do mixing engineers do in real consoles? What mixing engineers do in on real consoles to get me to do this in my DAW? So that's going to be my next video. It's going to be it's kind of like this. A few things. One thing mixing engineers hardly ever do is put effects like reverbs and delays and doublers and all kinds of effects that can create these unique effects to vocals or whatever on the same channel. They always put it on an auxiliary channel. We call it aux channels, or send it to an auxiliary channel. In some DAWs, you have to build those auxiliary channels. Some DAWs, they're there, but most DAWs, you have to actually literally add in auxiliary channels. The beauty of a DAW is that you can add as much as you want. The downside to an actual real console is you're only limited to how the console's built. If the console comes with enough auxiliaries or enough bus channels for what you need to do, then you're good. Some situations, the console may not have enough auxiliaries and bus channels or channels all together to do what you need to do, but you're stuck with it. Sometimes there are alternatives by changing out the console with a different console. Sometimes the console is just way too much for what a person needs. Sometimes the console don't have enough what the person needs. In digital audio workstation world, you can build as many channels, auxiliary channels, bus channels, and everything as long as your hard drive and your CPU and RAM can handle it. If your CPU, RAM, and all that can't handle it, then you got too much going on. But if your computer can handle that many tracks, that many auxiliaries, that many buses, you're good to go. Including once again, the last thing on this is about the Outboard Gear. This is the reason why a lot of plugins look like virtual versions of Outboard Gear. The advantage to plugins is it requires no patch cable. And in the real studio world, a lot of times you have to buy lots and lots of Outboard Gear. The great thing about plugins is that you only have to buy one, and you can use it 100 times, 100 different places, change the settings 100 different ways, and it's like you have 100 of those units. That is not happening in the real studio world. So they have to choose their outboard gear carefully. What pieces of gear is going on what channel, and what auxiliaries, and so forth. So the patch bay is one of the biggest key components in a recording studio to get the gear in to be heard in the console. This is why the mixing console is one of the most important things in the recording studio in your DAW. If you want your DAW to sound like how they've been doing it in professional recording studios for years, you have to understand how the mixing console works. So to sum up this video, these are the key components to understand. And this is why they keep making plugins like tape saturations and even live room plugins and so many other plugins. They're trying to emulate to get your DAW to sound like a commercial professional recording studio. The thing is, there are a lot of people that get into this recording world and they don't understand how recording studios work, including the console. So that's why they make a lot of mistakes. Once you start understanding how the recording console work and how an engineer does everything on the console, including how to use EQs, how to use compressors, because one of the most abused things when it comes to processing is not understanding how key EQs work, not understanding how compressors work, not understanding how reverbs work and delays and other effect units and things like that, and not understanding where to put it, how to use it, and everything else. Once you understand how to use an EQ, how to use a compressor, reverb, delay, and where do I put all this gear on the console in my DAW, the same thing you would do in a real studio. If you learn how to do this, you can go between the two. You can go between a real console and real outboard gear using a tape machine, or you can do it in the DAW. And what's great about, you have a lot of mixing engineers that came from the analog world where they were using large format consoles, tape machines, and plugins. Most of those engineers, if they are pretty computer savvy, they see immediately what's going on with the DAW and set their stuff up as if they're working in a virtual recording studio. And this is the reason why so many really good mixing engineers and recording engineers know how to make their DAW sound like a virtual professional recording studio. So I'm going to end the video. I just wanted to make this video to get you this is for novice, to get people to understand. You have to understand how it works and what is being done in a real commercial studio, that when they were using an actual physical console, a tape machine, and outboard gear to become better in your DAW. If you understand that all the principles apply, all the principles, the basic principles apply in a recording studio, apply the same way in your DAW. That's why I think we got to change it to I think I got to change it to VSRT. I think that's what we've been calling them DAWs, but I think we need to change them from DAWs to VRST. Virtual Recording Studios. It makes a lot of sense to me. So that's going to do it for the video. I felt compelled to make this video. So I'm going to make, this is part one. I want to make a part two. I want to make a part two to this. And I want, this is the reason why I was so adamant about setting up your DAW. That's why, if you understand what I'm saying with this video, then you'll start understanding about why I say when I make videos like setting up your DAW, when I make videos like that, then you'll understand, and then a lot of times your mixes and recordings will become a lot better. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a great one.